All right, so I thought it'd be fun to nerd out a little bit here for a minute. Do you know as humans, we make around 35,000 decisions a day? The question that I want to propose is how can we help humans reduce the number of decisions that they make and capitalize on it? That's a good question, right? So here's a good example. So I read a story about someone who bought a printer. It was a really inexpensive printer. We'll call it a Temu printer, yes? And it was for home use. It wasn't for business use. Setting it up wasn't exactly easy. First, you had to install a mobile app. Then you had to connect the printer to Wi-Fi. Then you had to install an app on a laptop in order to be able to use it. Then you had to create an account on the manufacturer's website. You had to make minor fine-tuning adjustments. And the person in the article said, I just kept thinking to myself, someday in the future when technology really evolves, our children will have printers that only have one button, on and off. In fact, almost 60% of Americans and Germans and 80% of Chinese people agree with the statement, I wish my life was just more simple. 60% of UK adults use price comparison websites to save money on financial products because these websites help make their choices easier. So many consumers buy branded products not because they're better, but because it's just simpler. A TV remote control is the first thought that comes to mind here. A TV remote control can have 30 buttons. How many of those 30 buttons do you actually use? Typically, three, right? Our brains were wired to operate in a world where we didn't have to learn so many new things every day. Scientists have even coined this term decision fatigue. I challenge you to ask yourself these questions. Does your product or service vision and strategy include efforts to simplify the customer's work or life? Does your team strive to create simpler solutions? Is simplicity your strategic advantage? If you think about the principles behind the Agile Manifesto, number 10 says simplicity, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done. I had to do that from memory, so I had to close my eyes when I said it. But yeah, it's one of my favorite values, right? Or it's not, it's one of the principles behind the manifesto. But what I can tell you is simplicity is a big deal. And I think sometimes we don't simplify enough. And it causes us to have confusion or problems in the workplace. Oftentimes we go in and we suffer from this, and I've seen it in several occasions. I remember one organization where I was with a product owner, and a product owner says, the team never builds what I want. And I'm like, well, we can fix that. So I went to the team and I talked to them about the importance of listening carefully, not leaving out features. And I left with this quote, and this is the one that burned me. I said, it's always better to meet those expectations and maybe deliver one or two surprise things than it is to underwhelm and not deliver what you need. And the team's like, we totally understand, we get it. And when I went back with the product owner shortly after, I told him I had met with the teams and everything was good and we could expect better results. And on the day of demo, he turned to me and says, yeah, he says, I sure hope it's more simple. He says, every time the team builds too much. I was like, oh boy, I just messed this up. And sure enough, the way I tell the story is, if the product owner would have said, I need a reliable source of transportation to get me from point A to point B, I want it to be something that is economical, but something that also gets me there and something that puts a smile on my face. While the product owner was expecting for the team to build a Fiat, the team wound up building a Ferrari. And a lot of people laugh when I say that, because I always get asked, was a Ferrari a bad thing? And I want to make sure I point out, I'm not saying the Ferrari is a bad thing. What I am saying is that if you ever own a Ferrari, you'll discover the severe maintenance cost to maintain this thing. I mean, even oil change is over $1,000. So I think it's one of those things where when you don't take the time to realize and have that aha moment about just how expensive maintenance is, how expensive upkeep is, how expensive parts are, how much more gas you're going to use. Sure, it's higher performance, and yeah, it makes you excited, but there's so many other things that you didn't consider. So it's one of those things where if you overbuild, you're going to wind up with something that's heavily overly complicated. And I've seen this happen with many products in a real world marketplace where they build, a solution for law enforcement officers that could probably get by with 8 or 10 features that they could use in a patrol car, but instead the product has 470 features, and that's a nightmare, right? Nobody ever wants to use that product. Everybody's like, I would rather jump out of a window than use this. And then the law enforcement officers end up giving a lot of verbal warnings. The city doesn't raise income and end up laying off officers because they don't have revenue to pay them. So what you're seeing is that by poorly designing things, we are creating a cycle where we're backing users out of what they really need. So if you're trying to find that comprehensive, working, winning strategy, take the most comprehensive strategy test in your mind. Ask yourself those challenging questions. Figure out ways to identify and make sure you know who your target audience is, what problem they're trying to solve. Maybe even lay it out in an elevator pitch and ask yourself. This comes from Jeffrey Moore, Crossing the Chasm, but for our target customer who is struggling with this issue or problem, our product or service is this type of product or service that provides this key benefit, a compelling reason to buy it. Unlike our competitor's product or service, ours is different or better for these reasons. If you can get to that point where you are answering those questions, the who, what, where, when, why, and how, and you can discover the value, that's what's going to help you have success with Agile. So you need to make sure that you're not just building complex solutions, because in the end, the complex solutions lead to complex problems. Sometimes the simplest solution is the best solution. That's going to do it. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have a topic you want us to cover, learn more at AgileDad.com. We'd love to hear from you. As always, we encourage you to stay healthy, stay well, and stay agile, my friends. Until next time, do take care.